I'm not pulling out of my driveway. We all know what that means. It's time for another Drive to Work, Coronavirus Edition. Okay, so one of the things I've done while at home is doing interviews with lots of people who work on magic and or community people on magic. But today I have someone who's worked on magic for quite a while now, Ken Nagle. Ken, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Mark, and this Not Drive to Work podcast.
Yes, on the Drive to My Den. Okay, so I'm going to start with the question I've been asking everybody. How did you get into magic?
Well, I was 14 or so. This is right in the time between middle school and high school. And the summer classes offered were driver's ed and PE. And so for driver's ed, we kind of sat around on the floor watching videos. But some people were playing cards on the floor. And when I took a closer look, they weren't, jacks and kings. They were angels and demons, things like that. And I'm pretty sure the first card I ever picked up was a Phalid from Fallen Empires. So I looked and said, this isn't a Jack of Hearts. What is this crazy thing? And every single card was something else equally crazy. So from there, we passed the time in the super boring driver's ed class by playing with someone else's magic cards. And this is a time when every deck was just all the forests and all the green cards, that's a deck. All the red cards and all the mountains, that's a different deck.
So to give people some sense, what set was out? What round when was this? That was
Fallen Empires, I'm pretty sure, was the latest set, and it was before Ice Age.
Okay.
So
we're talking 90.
Time, the first booster pack I ever purchased
94.
was an Ice Age booster pack.
Right, this is 94.
I think it's 94.
Okay, so how did you go from learning in your driver's ed class to what's the gap between that and the first Great Designer Search?
So that was from 94 to 2007, 2006-ish. So that was a pretty deep rabbit hole to pick up that Phalid and look at it, right? And then to be making, more green cards and more Phalids because the game needs more and more. That was high school plus college plus grad school plus a programming job for the Navy, a different programming job for the Army. And then the Great Designer Search happened in 2006 and concluded around December 2006. My first day at Wizards was January 15th, 2007.
So what got you to try the very first Great Designer Search? Why did you even enter it?
Well, my friends were playing cards like just for funsies, right? Because we had our normal day jobs and played at night. And I said, hey, here's a job thing on the internet. Mark Rosewater is going to run something like The Apprentice, an online interview. And I had played enough of the game through osmosis to potentially learn how to design new magic cards. I wasn't like most of the people in the Great Designer Search where I had like sets and sets of stuff that I'd come up with, I had an entire 20 cards I'd come up with or something. So I did the work to get past the first few questions while my friends did not. It's crazy how if you make them write 500 words about the color pie, they're like, oh, I don't know, and then they stop. But through all the hurdles, I answered the questions and did all the exercises and was barely hanging on up until the final three.
So here's a story that I don't know if the audience knows, but it's one of my favorite behind-the-scenes stories of you. First you do the essays, then you take the multiple choice test, and the third test is a card design test where we give you constraints and you have to design some number of cards so we can test your card design skills. And so I send everybody who would pass the multiple choice test, I send out the card design test, and then I said, you have to turn it in during this 24-hour window starting at midnight to midnight. You have 24 hours to turn this in. And you turned it in at like 12:01 a.m. Like the first minute you could turn it in, you turned it in. And everybody else like took time because, you know, they wanted to get extra time for the designs or whatever. But you turned it in immediately. And I always remember that you were you turned it in like 12:01 and the next person turned it in 12 hours later or something. It was,
Right. So my thinking there was, hey, here's the test. I probably am not going to pass anyway, but what I can be is the fastest person to turn it in, that's for sure. And the test was bizarre because you sort of needed 6 cards that were 5 colors and like in all the card types, it just didn't match up. So I turned in a bunch of cards that actually became real cards. Like Dryad Arbor became a real card.
Yeah.
The Align the Hedron alignment is a card I submitted back then that became a real card. So it was more or less I used 3 or so cards from the 20 I'd already made and then just filled in the rest of the blanks to fill the colors, card types, and converted mana costs that were missing. And then just hit send because I could sit there and mull it over, or I could be the first one and make an impression that way.
It was funny because I was a little frustrated when I saw that you turned in. I'm like, oh, come on, he didn't even maximize his time. And then I looked at him and I go, oh, these are pretty good. So anyway, so you obviously did well, the Great Designer Search, coming in second, basically. But you got offered an internship. So coming in second, you still got an internship. So what was that like, being an intern at Wizards? What was that experience?
So it's a lot of work. Most people think that making games, designing games, playing games, testing games, producing them, it's all fun. You know, there's no drama, there's no busy work, there's no grinding, but it's a company with cubicles and paperwork and all that jazz. So, but I definitely wanted to learn as much as I could because, you know, I'm operating under the assumption that I'm not going to get far in this Great Designer Search. So I'm still operating on the assumption I'm not going to get very far in this internship either, right? So I had assumed I would eventually have to move back, but I had a dual internship with both Magic and Duel Masters, and I've led 3 Duel Master sets between that internship and now. So I had to do multiple games, multiple like resource systems, and just try to keep up to speed. Because once you hit inside the doors, it's not like there's a set. It's 3 months working on that, like the real world. There's like 6 sets, all in flight of various completionness, right? So you have to absorb everything, and everything's moving. As far as what the cards are, mechanics are, themes are, artwork, swaps, and everything. So it's definitely a gigantic, bigger puzzle of a different ilk when you're inside trying to make a game than when you're outside just trying to play the game, learn the game.
Okay, so you obviously, was it a 6-month internship? I think it was a 6-month internship.
Yeah, it was 6, and then it got extended to around 8, so it was around August. I had a offer letter that I still have upstairs.
So anyway, it turns into a full-time job. So over the years, you've had the chance to work on a lot of different Magic stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you led. So we're going to start with the very first set that you led, which was World Wake. So let's talk a little bit about leading your very first set.
Right. So I remember that being brought into the office, and you were there, and they're saying, Ken, we're going to have you lead this set. It's a small set. It's a little early for you to lead a set, but here you go, right? Because I'd been on Zendikar, and I actually play tested the early version of Zendikar when it was called Landapalooza.
Yeah.
Right? So I had a grasp on that. And so World Wake was my first lead. I got to make a bunch of cards that I've always wanted to make. Amulet of Vigor is one. Terastodon is another. So I had I've been given reins of stuff I wasn't used to having the reins for. And I specifically remember early design playtests of World Wake. The lands mattered like way too much, right? We had landfall mattering. We had when you play a forest, that would matter. To where it would matter most on your 6th or 7th turn, you actually just wanted to draw more basic lands off the top of your deck, and all the spells were way worse than just playing another land. That's what we call over-theming, right? So Worldwake continues to be my favorite set that I've ever done. It has a very special place in my heart.
Well, it was your first set. You always remember your first set.
My favorite set is it's Worldwake.
Yeah, my first set was Tempest, and I have a warm spot for Tempest. That was my first set. Okay, so we make Worldwake. So the next thing you did was actually not a premiere set, but was a supplemental set. Arch Enemy. Let's talk a little bit about making Arch Enemy.
Yeah, so Arch Enemy is the sort of many versus one multiplayer format. I had, at some point in R&D, I had the most multiplayer experience of anyone that had been there, because most people were hired off of having Pro Tour experience, but I've only had one Pro Tour I've been to, and I played tons of multiplayer during those college years. So we had the notion that could a different kind of multiplayer be where one person's the big bad and something like 2, 3, or 4 other people can sort of gang up on them. So you have to sort of power up the arch enemy to where they can handle it. So Arch Enemy is the many versus one multiplayer format, and I like doing stuff like that because you get to make lots of griefy things happen, right? It's fun to feel very overpowered.
Yeah, for those that don't know, real quick, Ken is the griefer of R&D. He loves griefer, meaning you enjoy sort of the pain of other players.
Right. We could be playing the game, but it's more fun if I play the game and then you sort of like suffer watching me play the game. But it's taken me a long time to come to terms to admit that, by the way. A griefer to me.
Yeah, so I mean, Arch Enemy was very interesting in that, like, one of the things I like about so this is one of our innovative products, innovation SKU, which is just, here's a different way to play Magic. Here's something that's different from the norm. And I love the flavor of Arch Enemy, just the giant cards that the Arch Enemy used, and that they really had this, like, crazy supervillain sort of feel to them.
Yeah, the balance is the most difficult thing, which is not my strong suit, right? And get maybe 75% of the way there, but getting the Arch Enemy to be balanced, and we did slightly different stuff in Arch Enemy Nicol Bolas, right? Some of the schemes, they actually like level up and stuff later in the game. So it's fun, different format, but again, the balance is difficult to get under control.
Okay, next up was New Phyrexia, which was definitely, right, I guess Worldwake was a small set. I'll call New Phyrexia a medium set.
Right, so I was specifically asked by VP Bill Rose to make New Phyrexia feel not like a third set, right? Because it was the third in a line, Scars of Mirrodin, Besieged, New Phyrexia. I wanted it to feel like, oh, this is sort of one step away from being a third set. So definitely wanted it to feel like the bad guys have won, the Phyrexians are taking their victory lap, and evil abounds. So some of that griefer tendencies leaked in there. There's lots of bleedy things, lots of stuff to make opponents lose life, lots of color pie bendy things that make all the colors feel evil. So that's probably the most evil feeling I can make something feel in a Magic set. That's New Phyrexia.
Yeah, one for the audience that might not have played during that time, we did this thing where we went back to Mirrodin, which we had visited before, and then you learned that, oh my god, the Phyrexians were there, and then in the second set, there was a war in which, like, the Phyrexians were like 10% of the first set, and then they were at 50% of the second set, and we told the audience, depending on the outcome of the war, the third set would either be New Phyrexia or Mirrodin Pure, and we didn't let them know the name of the set till like right before the set released.
Right, so I definitely wanted to feel 90% Phyrexian Set 1, right? 10% Mirren stuff. So I think the players mostly figured that out, but
the smart ones figured it out.
What they wanted.
There was a lot of debate, but the smart ones, the people that sort of kind of understand our systems, figured it out because we made it so that when the block was done, half the cards were Phyrexian and half the cards were Mirren. And if you crunch the numbers, you could figure that out. But okay, so let's go. So your next big project was another innovation SKU, Commander decks. There's this format that was kind of popular, so we made decks for it.
Yeah, Commander grassroots format was getting a bunch of play by R&D internally as well, and I made a bunch of decks. Godo Bandit Warlord was my favorite one, but I had a handful of others. So at the time, it wasn't Commander. It was just an innovation multiplayer SKU. So think of something like you could play it Two-Headed Giant, you could play it Free-for-All, something like that, which actually became different products later, Battle Bond, right, and Conspiracy.
Yeah.
But eventually it was settled on, hey, if we take this format, we call it Commander, we make specific cards for it, and maybe clean up the rules and stuff like that, we could make a product specifically geared towards it. And so that became 5 Commander decks with lots of new cards and new 3-color Commanders. These are wedges because they had the least amount of support. You could play like Vorosh the Hunter or something, but we gave you the Mimeoplasm, right? So that's why we chose the wedges. They needed the most love, and we made a bunch of multiplayer skewing new cards.
And that product was so popular, it became a yearly staple.
Yeah, it almost became annual. It was too slow to get annualized in the beginning, so we had a Commander's Arsenal to fill the interim, and then it became like Commander 2012, 13, 14, 15, right? And we've actually expanded it to be, try to give people Commander wherever they can, including our normal sets too, right? So the format's that popular.
Okay, so the next set you did, we're back to a premiere set, is you did Return to Ravnica. What was that like?
Right, so that was pretty cool because we knew that Ravnica was beloved. It was actually my favorite set leading up to being inside R&D. So the thing about original Ravnica, there was 4 guilds, 3 guilds, 3 guilds, and that was a 3-set model, right? This time we did it different. There were 5 and then 5, right? And Dragon's Maze was the last set with all of them. So we needed to fit 5 guilds in one set and 5 in the other. So we had to do a little puzzle of maybe some fast ones, maybe some slow ones, right? You want your speed to be there, balance between both sets. And so we had to come up with new mechanics for the 5 guilds.
Yep.
That were similar but not the same, right? So it's a Golgari needed a graveyard mechanic, right? Azorius kind of wanted a slow, control-y mechanic, but...
So what was the first Azorius mechanic we did?
That's where you reveal it on your upkeep and get
No, I don't mean the one we did originally.
Oh.
I mean in design for Return to Ravnica, we started with a different mechanic that we later printed in a different set. What mechanic first was here, but we took it out and then it ended up showing up in a later set?
Well, we printed Detain. I know we tried a couple things that we cut because they were too lame. Which one are you specifically thinking of?
Constellation was first for Azorius.
Oh.
But it wasn't. The problem was it's hard to do things that are very synergistic, very like themed to something because the things around it don't have that theme, and so it's hard to care about things sometimes like that. So
yeah, we cut that pretty quick. Like card type stuff is a hard sell in a set with guilds, and you're trying to wiggle people around in draft.
Yeah,
but we tried a lot of stuff for all the guilds to end up where we ended up. So Overload is a mechanic that I had actually in my Great Designer search again.
Yeah.
My original submission. So you can kind of tell I like to make. You can, if it doesn't get printed once, it's a secret of being an R&D. You can keep trying it until it sticks.
You're telling me I'm the master of that.
Yeah. Just be persistent and keep trying. Eventually, the Overload will stick. Hedron alignment will stick. So.
Okay, so after Return to Ravnica, the next set you led was a middle set, Born of the Gods.
Right, so Born of the Gods had a bunch of structure to it, being a middle set. So we knew what the first set had. It had Theros with gods, heroes, and monsters. And then we knew that we needed some more gods, some more heroes, some more monsters. So the gods for sets 2 and 3, Journey into Nyx, Born of the Gods, we did the multicolor ones, right? So we had some of those to fill. We did a different monster mechanic in Tribute. And then we had a story thing, trying to make creatures feeling inspired. At least when we were playtesting it, we called it like dreaming. Because the storyline is, if you have enough followers thinking about you, worshiping you, believing in you, and you're a god, then you actually become real, right? So that was the inspiration for the inspired mechanic throughout Born of the Gods.
Yeah, there was behind the scenes, a lot of the story shifted a bit as we were making it. And like originally there was going to be a big war in the third set between the mortals and the creatures made by the gods, but none of that actually ended up happening.
Right. We were trying to build up some kind of, bigger scale conflict to, choose a side, right?
Yeah. Born of the Gods is interesting, and it definitely, we kind of knew where we wanted to start, and we kind of knew where we wanted to end, because we wanted to save some stuff for the third set, because third sets are kind of hard. But Born was kind of straddling between the two things, and it definitely was a tricky set.
Right. Yeah. We wanted to save all the constellation that you mentioned earlier, linears, for the third set, because, usually the problem is the third set has the difficulty, which is, the thought that New Phyrexia was having when I was told by the VP to, try to be bigger / more main setty, right? So, but I think we stopped 3-set models for a little while after that.
Yeah, we did. Okay, so your next set was another middle set, Fate Reforged, talking about a set living in between two other sets.
Right, so Fate Reforged is the middle small set between two large sets, right?
Yep.
It's a time travel story. So the Khans of Tarkir have won the day in the first set, and in the third set, the Dragons of Tarkir have won the day. But in Fate Reforged, it's 1,000 years in the past, and Sarkhan Vol is the POV character, and so both dragons and Khans can win the day, so it's up in the air.
Yeah, the way we drafted the set was you drafted the Khans came out, and then when Fate Reforged, you drafted them together, and then when Dragons came out, you just drafted just Dragons and Fate. You didn't draft Khans because they represented the two different versions of the timeline, basically.
Right, they were supposed to not coexist, right?
Yeah.
The time travel trope, right? Two things, they're mutually exclusive. So there's a bunch of gimmicks in Fate Reforged trying to hint that, hey, this inventor created a vial in this timeline and a bow in that timeline, because you got to shoot dragons in one timeline or blow up humans in the other, right? So it's it had a bunch of gimmicks, I'll say, to try, and it was hard. It was easy to do the things pointing at Khans of Tarkir, and way harder to do the ones pointing at Dragons of Tarkir, because that set was still being made, being in flux.
Yeah, and the fact that you had it work with both sets. I mean, I know when I stuck you on and when I picked you to be the lead of it, I'm like, I knew it was a very complicated set, so I had faith for you to try to figure that all out.
Yeah, that's why there's a bunch of like hybrid mythics, like Tassiger and those rares that have one color hybrid mana of the other two. So you could play them in your Khans deck that's wedge colors, or you could play it in your Dragons of Tarkir deck that's only two colors.
Yep.
So we had to straddle a bunch of lines like that.
Okay, so let's just jump to the next set. I'm trying to get through all your sets here. So the next set you did was Eldritch Moon.
Ooh, very creepy. So Eldritch Moon is the cosmic horror, only hinted at, right?
Yeah.
In Shadows of Innistrad. But now full-blown Eldrazified werewolves, Eldrazified humans going crazy everywhere. So more transform cards. This time they become colorless Eldrazi. That's a thing we did on the backsides of a lot of the cards. And we tried to play up a sense of dread, right? So the werewolves actually flip in a different way in that set. There's some anticipation to it. Your creatures could spring forth from other ones, right? So we tried to get the evolve theme big and loud. And to top that all off, I had a pretty crazy PowerPoint slide that got a lot of wows that would show the two angels that would form Brizella, right?
Yep.
They would, Bruna and Gisela could flip over and meld into Brizella, right? The voice of Nightmare. So I had it animated on a slide. It wasn't real yet. But
here's a behind the scenes thing for the audience. You had been trying to figure out how to make some sort of mechanic where things came together, like in New Phyrexia. That was one of your mechanics that ended up getting cut, but it was a passion of yours to try to figure out, and then you realized that double face cards could get you there.
Right. Yeah. Just something fun that cards could do in general is you could smash them together and get something bigger and better. So tried it multiple times and needed the backside of two different transform cards to get there for the three meld pairs in Eldritch Moon.
Okay,
so that was BFM inspired, right?
Yes,
the first time that was done.
Yeah, BFM and Unglued was the our first smashing cards together. Okay, so the last premiere set that you led was Ixalan, which you and I actually co-led together.
Right, Ixalan, the exploring plane, where it's a new plane, so we had to fill it in with all the denizens, right? So we had a couple sort of explorers. They were the pirates, they were the vampires, and then a couple sort of people that were already there. So we got merfolk, right? They're defending the temple. There's a secret, right, to defend. So we tried to put there's the explore mechanic in general that's supposed to get a feeling of going on an adventure, right? And we started with a bunch of crazy grids for how the colors would work.
Yep.
I specifically remember dinosaurs being blue-green, because you could have big stompy monsters on the battlefield, but some, I guess, plesiosaurs in the ocean, right?
Yeah.
A mosasaurus or two. However, after playing with iterations that were like that, we decided, hey, we need more. I think people are going to want more dinosaurs than this. So we swapped them to Naya and sort of decided, hey, maybe the big plant eaters and maybe the pterosaurs would be white, right?
Yeah, the problem we had when they were blue-green was they were just one archetype, and so many people wanted to draft dinosaurs that everyone was fighting over blue-green, and we're like, oh, dinosaurs are cool. Let's put them in more colors so more people can draft them.
Right. So eventually, wiggling things around, we decided that people would like the pirates and the dinosaurs the most, so they got 3 different colors. And then the smaller tribes got to be vampires and merfolk. So, and we gave them as fresh color, right? Merfolk get green and vampires get white. So, I mean, we tried to be fresh all around because that's what a new play needs to be. It needs to have, self-identity. something that hasn't been done before.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that we thought people wouldn't like vampires or merfolk, just we had done a lot of merfolk and vampires in Magic's history, and dinosaurs and pirates were mostly new. I mean, we had touched on them a little bit, but mostly were new tribes that you could build.
Yeah, so we felt that there's a bunch of stuff, or pent up rage, or pent up emotion, or pent up want to actually give Ramirez de Petro, right, the true calling, and to not accidentally make dinosaurs like Allosaurus Rider, right, to do him justice.
So, Ken, I am almost at my desk here. So I'm just curious, looking back, I mean, you've been at Wizards how many years now?
Since January 15, 2007, so that's 13 years plus coronavirus, right?
So sort of a sum up, sort of your time working on Magic. What if you had to give a parting thought on it?
What I like to say is Magic's a big game, but it's only getting bigger, and it's a very voracious and hungry beast, and it will always want new cards, and that's what I'm here for.
Well, anyway, it's always a pleasure. Ken and I have been in many teams together. In fact, we're on a team now doing cool stuff in the future that you guys can't know about yet. But it's always fun working with you, Ken. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Enjoy the interview, and hopefully we'll have longer drive to work.
But anyway, guys, I now see my desk, so we all know what that means. This is the end of my drive to work. So instead of talking Magic, it's time for me to be making Magic. So thanks, Ken, for joining us.
Thank you, Mark.
And you guys, I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.